Hello and welcome everybody to this webinar in a series brought to you by Cure AI and Hygiene Health. My name is Dr. Hugh Harvey. I'll be your moderator for this session. We're going to be discussing scaling AI in the NHS and what the role of the imaging networks currently is and what it could be in the future. So we're going to take a look at scaling AI in the NHS. And of course, scaling can't happen without initial early deployment, which is where we're at. And a few of our panelists have already mentioned their early experiences. I wanted actually to start then with you, Suraj, because you say you've deployed one and then that fell back and then you've gone for others. Do you want to just explain the role as a clinical director and as a consultant radiologist, what your role has been in picking, choosing and helping in the deployment of these sort of early adoptive pilots or commercializations?
Yep. So to begin with, it was more, I think, is this going to work? Is this, how useful it is? Because back in 2018, 2019, it was very early, days, and we had all commercial organizations running behind everybody trying to get to deploy. I think a huge issue was IG, clinical safety cases. There's no precedence in the past. And then if you go to the regulators, you've got not much help. I'm not sure if you get much help now as well. But back then it wasn't, it was very difficult. So we as an organization, I think we were very supported by IT at that point, and we had a digital 5-year plan, which AI figured heavily in not just radiology, I think in other bits of medicine as well. So that probably was a starting point for us. And then commercially, I think we spoke to a couple of vendor suppliers at that point, and then we decided, okay, we're going to try with this one. The reason at that time was, I think what we were trying to see is where it becomes clinically helpful for the department. So you may have algorithms, 20 algorithms doing chest. I think its question is, what do you want out of an algorithm? I think that's the fundamental question we've got to answer ourselves. And then the next thing would be commercially, in the long run, is this going to be viable? But that we don't have answers as even now. I'm not sure whether we're still a few years away before we. My feeling is that before we get to that point, and then it was a case of getting the PACS vendor, the risk supplier all involved, getting that crucial integration, IG to approve the use of cloud, server. So on those, that took a bit of time, ironing out everything else and getting it, the whole process in motion. The next bit, and this was the most interesting bit, is because back in 2019, I think it was just kind of still, early days. Interestingly, I found all colleagues trying to find mistakes in the AI, which is kind of human tendency at that time. And I think it actually took a lot more time to report a chest X-ray because everybody's trying to, see if it's right, wrong. And I think we also didn't understand or appreciate what normal and abnormal meant at that point. So it took a betting process or a period before we actually got really comfortable. I think once we got comfortable, I think it was more easier because you understand what the algorithm is trying to do, and it's more like a clinical decision support tool for us. And also we understood where it was where its negative points were. There were some misses and stuff like that. So you start building your experience as you go. But it's not a simple journey. It does take its time, and you need to give that time as well.
Yeah, there's a learning curve to using new tools, and I think the learning curve is not just for the clinicians, it's for the PACS and IT managers as well.
Yes.
I'm sure the first time you deploy one of these, it's a headache, and hopefully you learn from it. So perhaps, Mark, you can maybe give us a brief summary of a journey of how it looks when you're trying to deploy AI across a trust, And then we can move on to Lee and talk about, well, once we've done it in one trust, how are we scaling that? How are we sharing those learnings and making sure that we smooth the ride out for future deployments?
Yeah, so we had a similar start, if you like, to that one that's just been described. So we dabbled with chest X-ray AI just prior to COVID, and probably for different reasons it didn't take off. COVID obviously was one of the challenging aspects of it, but we just found at the time it wasn't an area that we were crying out for help with in terms of our reporting. We were well on top of it, and reporting normals pretty much as fast as we were reporting the urgent. So in terms of using it as a workflow tool to help prioritize our reporting, it wasn't really an area that we were looking to invest in. In terms of process of rolling out AI, it was quite laborious. We had to go through an awful lot of red tape in terms of DPIAs and all the governance processes. And even now, to try and stand up a pilot for anything, if it's direct with a supplier, certainly for our trust, we get cross-charged by our IT department. So there's a 5-figure bill that needs to be covered for a small VM and some technical architect time and stuff like that. So on top of all of the difficulties around IC security, there's also a cost implication for us, if we work directly with suppliers. And then you've got the buy-in, haven't you, as well? You need to pick, not only do you need to pick an area that perhaps clinically it's needed, but you've also got to get the right subset of clinicians that are going to work with this tool as well. There's still some unease out there. So you need to get the people on side to give it a fair shout as well when you do put something like this into pilot. Understand how you're going to use it in your workflows, what you need to change to allow it to run successfully, and then ultimately how you measure it as well, because you need to stand up a business case for this at the end, don't you? So there's highly likely not to be any real cost savings as such. It's all in time and efficiencies, isn't it? So you need to find ways of being able to measure that accordingly so that you can build your business case afterwards. That's certainly a very complex process, and it takes an awful lot of time to get going.
And you mentioned virtual machines there, or VMs. Is that the main mechanism of which you're deploying, or have you also done cloud integrations?
Yeah, so we've our PACS provider has got their own amplifier store, as they call it, which is that's been a game changer for us in terms of the opportunities to allow us to trial other AI products. We've had a go at a couple of others that are on there that again haven't bore fruit in terms of any procurement, but that was a really simple and seamless piece of integration that has been put in place to allow us to set these pilots up. It completely takes the need away for standing up the infrastructure. It covers off pretty much all of the IT security aspects and stuff as well. So the amplifier or an AI type gateway is definitely a game changer in terms of being able to look at some of this.
Interesting, and that's Sectra's amplifier, if I understand correctly.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So Lee, as an architect in this space, tell us about your process for designing the deployment infrastructure for such an AI, and your experience so far, and how are you planning on sharing those so you can scale further?
Well, yeah, at the moment, the AI requirements are really coming through at the individual trust level rather than network-wide or consortium-wide still at the moment. So, and as Mark said, when we've looked at the early on deployments, before the amplifier store and marketplace was there, then it was a process of standing up either physical or virtual hardware on a trust site, which obviously has a lot of time delays. Even if you can get agreement on the funding, as Mark mentioned, there's different trusts work differently in the way they cross-charge the funding, but you're still, even if you can get the approval for that, then waiting for the internal trust IT resource, which could be months to deploy. Marketplace, so that adds a lot of delay on. So the introduction of the AI platforms and me really speeds up that technical side of the implementation to trial something and really launch a 1 month pilot. Where if you've got a 6 to 9 month lead time to go into a 1 month pilot, then it really puts you off the effort of doing it. So the introduction of these marketplaces, obviously for us, where we as a consortium, as the SWASH Consortium across what's 5 trusts right now, and Hampshire will be joining Sectra. We're starting off some image migration soon. Then for us to be able to work with Sectra's marketplace where we already have that immediate integration, it means that from an IG point of view, the pseudonymization requirements, anonymization, we can sign off once to say the marketplace is doing that for us. And that one sign off then covers all of the different AI providers in terms of at least knowing we've got that pseudonymization process ironed out and we know that that is working and auditable.
Yeah. So it is worth pointing out that there are multiple platforms available. It's still an early market, but it's good to see that you've had success with the Sectra version. Suraj, you're clinical director, and you said you interact with other clinical directors across the ICS, the Integrated Care System. Do you want to explain, perhaps for some of the people who aren't UK-based, who might be watching, what an ICS is, and largely what its remit is, and how it can, in theory, help scale AI across multiple hospitals?
Sorry. So just for everyone's sort of information, ICS is Integrated Care Service. It's a new way, or it's how the NHS England now wants to conduct its business or services across county or region wide within England. And for example, for us, it's in our area, which is Kent and Medway. So there's 4 acute hospitals under the ICS, plus all the primary care, which would comprise of the GP surgeries, and then we've got the mental health trusts and some of the community organizations as well. So all the funding goes off to the ICS, and the ICS now has to decide how best to use the money within the region, so there's value for money and the patient gets the best in terms of the taxpayers' money. And within the Integrated Care Service, there is a imaging network board. So we are, by governance structure, the imaging network board handles all the imaging requirements for that county or the ICS, and the board's normally got its own governance and various subcommittees. So IT and digital will sit as one of the steering groups within the imaging board. And within the IT and digitalization program, that's where the AI sits at the moment. And our experience is the same. I think at the moment it's still trust-wide. We are what NHS England would call like a developing, in its maturity matrix, a developing network. So we're still, in the early phase of getting into a proper network organization. And our fundamental problem to deploying AI within a system is that historically the other trusts have been on a different PACS supplier, and it's probably not one of the easiest to bolt onto bolt AI on. So now they have moved to the same supplier as us, which is Sectra, and the migration is is going on, and once it's ready, probably by September, then we can start looking at AI deployment as a region-wide process. So that's sort of a nutshell of how an ICS and the AI deployment works.
So that's interesting. So within an ICS, which covers multiple trusts, it's now kind of seen as best practice that you should be all using the same PACS and then potentially all using the same AI platform.
Yes. So, yeah, well, I think that's true. But I mean, just to be clear, we do not have that agreement locally because we're still in that phase of looking at AI and seeing, you know, what regional inequalities are there. Now, where I think a discussion will happen is one trust may have a priority over other ones. So, you know, we have to iron out those kind of difficult, you know, issues. So, the best example will be if you've got a trust struggling for chest X-ray reporting, then, you know, a chest algorithm to help prioritize reporting makes sense. And somebody else might be struggling to recruit chest radiologists, so you know, a lung nodule algorithm will help. So it's looking at those fine complexities and seeing, you know, what the system probably requires, and maybe looking at a system-wide deployment.
And I presume, Lee, from your point of view, if everyone used the same PACS and platform across an ICS, then would that make your job easier?
It definitely makes it easier because the integration, I think the procurement, the governance, say the clinical safety case could sit with the network rather than 4 organizations doing it. It's just the amount of manpower that's required. You know, if each trust has to go and do it individually, I know how these clinical safety cases take, and, you know, it's just a bit of a nightmare. You know, if you're trying to do that, and none of us have got resource or time or money to do it independently. So if the network could take on that role, then it saves a lot of time, and the governance can sit with the ICS in that case.
Mark, any thoughts on the ICS structure and how it can potentially help you scale across other trusts?
So I think the first thing is, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because this is where the money's landing. It's the money that is driving the AI decisions, isn't it? And you know, you get a whole group of trusts and you're making an assumption that everybody's pinch points are the same. So everybody wants the same AI in the same body part or speciality within radiology, when that may not be the case. So I think that's a challenge straight away, but it does make sense to try and manage it at a regional level if you can. I just think they've got it round the wrong way slightly, as always, in that the money comes first and then the decisions about how you spend it come second. And I may be going a bit off piece, but one of the things that we've really struggled with is we're not set up as a trust yet to be able to move AI forward. So we don't have an AI strategy within radiology. We don't have a working group or a project group or a clinical lead to look at AI. And, you know, absolutely there could be something that the network could be doing to help shape that, but they do need to be mindful that those trusts within that region may not all want the same thing.
And that's crucial as well. So you have these overlapping Venn diagrams of need. You have the ICS area, might have an imaging consortium, which is a slightly different area. And then within that, you have different needs. It does. And we all know that, you know, we can make radiologists a certain % more efficient, but there's a limit to which they can work. Suraj, I don't know if you can speak to your experience. Once you've got comfortable over the learning curve of AI, did you find that it was helping speed up reporting, or was it just more your confidence in reporting?
So I think, so there's, I mean, from a radiologist perspective, I think it does help a little bit. I'm not sure in terms of time savings how much really. So again, it depends on one's experience. If you're a radiologist who's been reporting chest X-rays for, say, 20 years, then I think probably not a huge amount of time savings is there. But if you're trying to support radiographers or say registrars or very junior consultants who normally don't report chest X-rays, then yes, there would be a time saving that would be can be factored. It's not straightforward, just like everybody said. It's just it depends on one's experience and what the AI is doing as well. I mean, for example, the next iteration what we're looking at is not in terms of reporting, but in terms of can it flag a cancer as soon as the patient's had the chest X-ray? And then if it does that, our plan is to get the patient into the CT scan on the same day. So that changes the dynamic, and I think then the savings is in terms of patient's outcome, wherein you've just compressed the timelines from 3 weeks to potentially 1 day.
Yeah.
And that's a massive saving and a massive improvement in patient outcome, especially if we are in the world where we're trying to find grade 1, grade 2 lung cancers and stuff like that. Then it comes on its own and has that value.
Yeah, but to measure those long-term outcomes takes a very long time. Talking quality of life, adjusted years over a lifetime of a patient. No one's been able to measure that yet because AI is so brand new. One thing that I wanted to ask, probably you, Suraj, is if the AI is reporting all the normal stuff, does that not make the radiologist's job harder because every scan is an abnormality?
Yes. So that potentially would increase your kind of reporting time. But in the same wavelength, if we say 20% of the workload is taken out of the system, so that reduces the amount that's there for reporting. Plus, I don't know, different systems and different trusts have various agreements of which chest X-rays are reported and which aren't. So, for example, in our trust, we traditionally don't report inpatients and outpatients, with the view that they are viewed by a doctor within the trust, and we prioritize mainly GPs and A&E stuff. It's just purely workforce issue. So this is where I think A&E will, AI will help in the workforce issues. If it can take the normals out of the system, at least.
Yeah. I'm going to jump to a couple of the questions now because I think they're quite pertinent here. First question here is from Mike. It says, in your imaging networks, do you have common IG processes, that's information governance processes, across all trusts, or is it still a trust by trust process? Mark, are you involved in the IG side of things?
So Lee would probably cover it fuller. I think we've just lost him, haven't we? But we do hold some stuff centrally, obviously, where we have a shared risk impact environment within SWASH. We have an IG work stream that runs alongside some of our other work streams in SWASH. They do have a lot of centralised agreements to cover us as an entity rather than an individual trust. In terms of things like AI that we're talking about now is very much still at local level, so there would be IG agreements in place at local levels currently for that.
Do we need a standardised NHS IG agreement for radiology AI? Is that something sensible that perhaps people who've deployed AI could all feed into a central committee and get some agreed national framework for IG sign-off? What do you think, Lee?
I would say it would be great if we could achieve that. It's not. I think it's the IG leads that need to feed into that rather than any of the radiology or AI teams. It's the IG leads that are going to have to accept because at the end of the day, it's each individual trust as the data controllers who are owners of that data and need to be happy. So it's the IG leads at the trusts, maybe one central IG lead at each network level that feeds into a national view. It would be great for a lot. We're not just talking about AI, we're talking about a national imaging registry, a number of other things related to radiology and imaging, where I think we need to be developing things at more of a national level for IG sign-off. Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. And another question here from Irina. Potentially, again, Lee might know the answer. Does NHS procurement get involved at the imaging network level? Looking at, sorry, my thing keeps jumping around. Looking at which modalities can make a difference if they're being implemented. So does NHS procurement get involved at that level, or is that still done very much individually by trust? Lee, do you know?
I think at the moment it's the central funding in NHS England and procurement that are pushing down on the trusts what they should take, and almost defining what benefits is expected we will realise at a network level from implementing something. I think actually it should be the other way around, as Mark said earlier, where each individual trust has different pinch points and pressures depending on the sizing of the teams, the demographic, and each trust needs to be analysing their own workload and identifying. So NHS procurement could make some of the purchasing processes easier, but the actual requirement needs to come from the trust and the network level.
And that's very much the case. We don't know it formally yet, do we? But the £21 million that's going to be presented as part of the 75th birthday, that very much is that, isn't it? There seems to be that there's going to be specific criteria on what you can spend that on, and perhaps even a short list of suppliers that you're presented with. They're already, the powers that be are telling us what it is that we need. That may well not be what actually, we at trust level or even at network level, want further down the line perhaps, but, it may not be our pinch points for now.
Yeah, that £21 million has been an interesting announcement. There's been a lot of chat, I think, across the NHS and industry about what exactly it's going to be for. Lots of people very excited about it. I think at the time of we're doing this webinar, if you're watching this after the fact, we don't know really. More information is forthcoming, we are told. I wanted to ask Mark and Lee, what are your top tips for others watching who haven't deployed AI yet? What are your top tips? If you could go back in time and go, I wish I'd known that, what would you tell people?
It's not perhaps so much of what I didn't know, but actually I think we should have been a bit more proactive internally earlier. Like to have got a group set up to start looking at this. For the last 2.5 years probably, it's been very saturated in terms of emails and calls from varying AI suppliers, offering pilots and trials and such forth, and they might come in through me, they might come in through the research team, they might come in through individual radiologists and such forth, and it's really hard to keep hold of that. And a couple of times we've gone into trials and pilots of things and never really understood what it is we're looking at or how we're going to, quantify the success of it afterwards. We've always known that AI is coming to a certain level, but we don't, and we're still not set up internally to be able to manage it properly. I think in hindsight, we should have got ourselves in a stronger position at local trust level to be able to make more of a conscious decision about where we want to go, what areas we think we can work with and what's available. And we're certainly playing catch up on that front now.
Would you agree, Suraj, Lee?
I think, something that I'd add from what Mark's just said is that we also need to consider the training or how we're bringing the clinicians and the end users on board, because they need to understand what it is that the AI is giving them. And I think where we've deployed without much user training, that has led to issues of people just taking for granted whatever they're being told by AI, where it should be a decision support or clinical support tool is just actually being treated as the report. We need to make sure that any user training is considered. AI can be deployed in a number of different scenarios, and some of the tools have different sensitivity settings, whether we're using for screening or for symptomatic work, and that needs to be understood and notified out to the users so that people understand what they're being given back.
So,
Suraj.
Yeah. My take on the question is that we need to be prepared. So one of the advice probably for any trusts which are starting the journey or maybe thinking about it is perhaps think about having an AI steering committee. I mean, maybe within the trust or within radiology itself. That then gives you a roadmap of what you want. You have to discuss internally and have that plan of what you want to do. what are your pinch points? Which would you like to approach first, and then talk to maybe, because at the moment you have to talk to suppliers and see what they offer, and then have to take a call. That if you go down that route, it takes a while. I mean, 6 to 8 months before you can get to see even most of the suppliers for one particular algorithm. The other thing is, I mean, a lot of discussion is around image analysis too. I mean, there are AI bits of AI in other areas of radiology as well. I mean, I'm not sure how much we focus on that, and one of the topics being ICS. Question is, do we use this for smart scheduling across the patch and stuff like that? So those are other big discussions which need to happen, and that can only happen at a network level. I think within a trust, or we'll be silly not to use the force of the network to get to that point.
And a question just coming from Dan, which actually I was about to ask as well, is how important is the evidence presented to you by suppliers when you're deciding to assess which one to use and deploy? Is the evidence critical, or are there more factors to consider? Suraj.
So we do look at the evidence at the moment, but I think at this point of time we have to. I think the route everybody, or at least what we've seen, is we have to be convinced ourselves. So we end up doing this 6-month, 1-year pilot to be sure that what we see in the nice brochure is what we actually get in the real world, and so we take it, but with a pinch of salt, and then we have to try and analyze it ourselves.
And do you take health economic evidence into account if someone comes to you with a model to show you your cost savings? Is that attractive to you as well?
Health economics is attractive, but I just don't know how true it is, because unless we're sure of what it delivers, I mean, at the very beginning, I mean, it's probably difficult. We look at it, but I think I tend to park it and see, whether this actually would deliver what it meant, what it says it would. And then we all know there's so much of intricate complications. A new scanner comes or a new tech comes, and all this evidence is thrown out of the window, isn't it? So you've got photon counting CT coming in. I mean, who knows what that will do to all the CT algorithms out there, So the health economics is as good as today, and most of the things are being planned for 3 years from now, or 2 years from now, isn't it?
That is true. There's another question here about the 21 million in funding. It's obviously a hot topic currently. Should it not go into helping the imaging networks create data sets that they can, ground truth and then test different vendors against? Is there an opportunity here to create maybe an NHS-wide imaging pool that we could quickly validate without having to do pilots, perhaps? Would that be a good idea? Lee, what do you think about that?
I think it's something that's needed, isn't it? The central NHS-wide data set to train the AIs. I don't think that's what this 21 million is for. I think this 21 million is aimed at efficiencies of individual trusts. So I think that there's definitely a requirement there to build that large data set that we can train on. But it's not this use case, I don't think.
No, and I can imagine it would be a nightmare for all the IG departments at every single trust to be sending data to one central pseudonymized stash, wouldn't it? I think we've learned a lot here today so far. We've learned that deploying AI, first of all, it is possible, but it's not easy. It comes with a cost, both human resource and financial. There's barriers in terms of information governance, technical architecture, but a couple of things that have helped people succeed are the same packs across the network helps, and an AI platform can help significantly as well, as we've heard in your case of the amplifier. So how do we think this is going to continue? Specifically, let's talk about SWASH. What's sort of the next steps? Are you looking at more AI? Are you looking at expanding your imaging network, consolidating your standards? What are you doing next?
So I think, as Mark mentioned earlier, what we found was, if we go back 12 months, everybody was getting daily phone calls trying to get AI into the trusts. And what we discussed is that we actually need to come up with some governance across the consortium on how we're going to manage this, and how we're going to evaluate and implement the AI. So it's not just around the technical elements, as we talked earlier. So Ridian's just posted about how they're using an amplifier gateway with Cure AI. So it's not about just the technical, it's about the governance across the network. Bearing in mind that if we're implementing any AI for one trust, we have a shared PACS, then potentially we are opening up access for that provider to the whole network, or at least the shared PACS instance. So we need to do some more work internally around the governance at the network level, whilst also having each trust try to build up their requirements, so that we're approaching it in the right way of us going out and deciding what it is we want, rather than having things pushed on us, or implementing pilots that are actually not addressing our core needs. So.
Mark, anything else you want to add to that?
No. I mean, I think it's fair to say, isn't it? At SWASH level, we haven't really done much at all in terms of an AI roadmap at consortium level. We have very much looked at the imaging network because that's where the money is coming from. We put a bid in as part of the DDCP funding for 24-25 for a lot of money to support AI and decision support as well. So I think we're kind of looking more in that direction as opposed to SWASH specific. What we do is, Lisa, we are very mindful that anybody that dabbles in AI, is opening it up to our SWASH Consortium pack. So we do try and learn off each other. If somebody's trying something, we won't go down the same path. We'll wait to see what the outcome is at that trust. So there's some kind of daily collaboration that goes on, but not, we don't have a separate work stream currently within SWASH to try and manage this.
Suraj, do you think then more central funding is required to help, not for the individual deployment of AI at trust? Do you think there's more central funding required to get these networks producing these roadmaps, standardizing their frameworks and procurement channels?
Yeah, definitely, because I think if you look at most networks, they are all struggling for money just to do day-to-day job. And then comes in AI with all sorts of its own intricate problems and issues, and trying to, we don't even know at this point of time how, what is the final outcome as well. So if the ICS has to spend its pot of money, I mean, they probably would think twice and thrice before they throw it at AI algorithms. So I think a dedicated central funding stream, having that central repository of training imaging data sets for analyzing, algorithms is kind of crucial at this point of time, so that we're not all doing the same thing. I mean, there's so much of money will be wasted if each trust is going to do the same thing. If we can just be done centrally and managed that way.
I'm going to move on to a couple of last questions then from the audience. Shruti has asked, from a patient's perspective, during the implementation process, is the acceptance of AI by patients a barrier? Was it taken into consideration by those decision makers? Can any of you speak to that?
We have a small experience with PPI, with patient participation, because we did invite patients as part of our chest algorithm. So this was the third wave of funding in the previous a couple of years ago, which got they funded and then they said they're not going to fund. So I'll park that for the moment. But as part of the process, we did invite patients, and I think most patients took it actually in a nice way, and they thought, if there's an algorithm that can detect something quicker and let the doctors or the trust know that there's a problem which needs to be sorted quickly, then they are happy for AI to help out in that phase. I didn't hear anything adverse at that point of time. I think there was some worries about data security, and I said, we all said, it will be governed by information governance. They're pseudonymized, so which was fine. And I think we had some feedback from patients saying maybe mention that in the letter the patient letters they get that there might be an AI involved at some point in the department. So that was one feedback we took. I think we may have put it on our trust website also. I have to double check that.
It's a really interesting question as well, isn't it? Because how do you manage patients perhaps that don't want their imaging read by AI, almost like an opt-out type thing again? And
they have the right by law to refuse, don't they? So we have to ensure that's available to them. A couple more points. Bartzer says there should be knowledge sharing across ICSs. Why reinvent the wheel when we can learn from each other? Are you aware, any of you, at the inter-ICS level, is there knowledge sharing happening?
The RCR were looking at an AI registry, weren't they? Apparently they were going to stand something up next year, which they were going to use as a learning and education tool, from what I understand of it, to get people to almost do a survey of what AI they've got and what they use it for and all that kind of stuff. That may be a way towards that. I don't know of anything personally at ICS or network level that's being undertaken.
Can I just come in? I think the AI registry has gone live. I think they have asked for feedback now. It's gone to all the clinical directors.
Yeah, it's coming soon. And Lee, very quickly before we finish, your point there.
I think just to feed back on that, I think it's more informal. So when we've been talking about image sharing or AI use, there's quite a lot of approaching other networks to find and to ask about their experience. As Ridian shared in the chat here, he's quite happy to discuss what they've done in GM. But I don't think there's any formal processes for that sharing at the moment. It's very informal and just network leads talking to each other, really, and setting up calls.
Yeah. Well, I think we've reached time now. That's been an hour. It's been fascinating, and thank you so much to you three, Suraj, Mark and Lee, for joining us and sharing your experiences. It's good to know that AI has been deployed in the NHS. There's a myth going around that it hasn't, but obviously we've busted that myth now, and that there are ways and means to do it, but it is by no means a simple and smooth process yet. And that scaling across the NHS is what people want, but there's a lot more work to be done. So thank you to you three, and also thank you to the audience for some excellent questions. I've been Hugh Harvey, and I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance today and your interest in this topic. And we're going to call it a day. Thank you very much.